when you're doubtful, say you're trapped, you ask yourself, well, why am I trapped? And that's a hard question, right? Because some of it's your own inadequacy, a lot of it. And all of the part of it that you can deal with is your own inadequacy. So even if it's unfair, even if you're hemmed in for any number of reasons, if you're in a workplace and pathological things are happening, this is easy. I can tell you how you know if pathological things are happening at your workplace or they're happening with you. One of the two, but you can straighten that out.
Everything that happens around you directly impacts who you become. From the foods you eat to the people you interact with, everything matters. It happens day after day, and sometimes you don't even realize it. Sometimes that growth is positive because it takes you closer to the best version of yourself. But at times, when left unattended, that evolution can be a negative one. Little by little, you can slowly become a person you don't identify yourself with someone you don't want to be. We become conformists. We stay stuck in our comfort zones. We hang out with toxic people because they're also fun to be around. And as a result, one day, it hits you. You feel stuck, lost. You're not doing what you want to do. You're unhappy. When you're too passive under difficult situations, you may feel like you've let yourself down. If your inner critic is telling you that you're letting people walk all over you, you won't feel good about yourself, and you may eventually overreact with anger or resentment. Instead, aim to share your point of view and use your voice to support your beliefs.
Who's pulling your strings? So you've put on this front that is there to make you popular and sexy and desirable and to mask from yourself your own inadequacies. But that's a role. Well, who wrote it? And for what purpose? And so Jung said, for example, that we all acted out a myth, and whether we knew it or not. And maybe you're acting out a tragedy. Maybe you're acting out narcissus. You don't know, because you've put that on yourself in an attempt, in some ways, to deliver to people what they want, or more accurately, to look as though you're delivering to people what they want. And it's not nothing to do that, right? Because at least you're attempting, in some sense, to adapt to the social world. Someone who's really infantile and dependent, someone who's never left home, part of their problem is that they haven't crafted a persona. One of the things that really shocks me, part of the reason that my son and I and our co-workers developed this essay app, is that young men in particular are never taught this. It's like, well, why be literate? Do you want to be competent and dangerous, or do you want to be vague and useless? Because those are your options. And I don't care what your job is. It doesn't matter what you end up doing. If you're a plumber, great respect for plumbers, by the way, and you're articulate, you can negotiate with your clients. You can introduce your coworkers. You can make a case for your employees. You can advertise your services. You can think through your problems. You're firing on all cylinders.
A crucial part for changing yourself is saying, yes, I want to change, and actually meaning it. Are you really going to do this time? Or is this just another one of those moments when you said you were going to do something and never actually did it? Keeping your reasons in mind is not only necessary to keep you on track throughout the process, but it'll also help you understand who you are. Always keep in mind, how does your dream life look? How do you see yourself in 3 or 5 years? I know it can be scary or confusing to think about that, so take a deep breath, close your eyes, and pay attention to what comes to your mind. Do you see yourself in an apartment or a big house? Do you see yourself with kids? Do you see yourself working from home or dressing up every day to head to your office? Keep your eyes on the prize.
So when I was doing my clinical work, which I did a lot of career work with my clients, both at a beginner level, I would say, like really a beginner level, with people who had no employment whatsoever, no history of employment, who were undereducated and who lacked every skill you could possibly imagine. So these were people who were really in dire straits, up to people who were operating at the top of their profession, but who could still strategize forward. And so, for example, let's say you're at a dead end in your job. Okay, so I don't find my work meaningful. All right, so that's a problem statement. It's like, well, why not? I find the work I do repetitive and boring and without spirit. I have a bad relationship or a neutral relationship with my boss who doesn't know who I am. I have problems with coworkers. All of that needs to be differentiated, right, and analyzed in detail. So all the clinical data indicates, well, the opposite of safe spaces, as Jonathan Haidt has been pointing out, that what you want to do when you identify something that someone is avoiding, that they need to do because they're afraid, you have them voluntarily confront it. And so you break it down. What you try to do, if you're a behavior therapist, is you break down the thing they're avoiding into smaller and smaller pieces until you find a piece that's small enough so they'll do it. And it doesn't really matter as long as they start it. Then they can put the next piece on and the next piece. And what happens is they don't get less afraid, exactly. They get braver. It's like there's more of them. And here's why. So imagine you do something new, and that's informative. Right? There's information in the action, and then you can incorporate that information and turn it into a skill and turn it into a transformation of your perceptions. So there's more to you because you've tried something new.
Standing up for yourself also means learning to set boundaries. Rather than be a people pleaser, you must be intentional to change a pattern of being a pushover. Be deliberate about how you want to be more assertive. Pick just one setting to start and script it out. Taking stand for yourself requires time to learn and become comfortable with. Even if it's your knee-jerk response to stay quiet and go with the flow, it's essential to know that you have the power to speak up for yourself. There's nothing wrong with saying no to people. If you're in an environment that makes you uncomfortable or you don't want to do a task, saying no can be beneficial. For example, if a coworker asks you to take on more work than you're capable of doing, you can explain that you already have a full schedule and can't take on anything else. Don't hesitate to look out for your mental health and say no when you need to.
We might say, for example, let's say you believe that you're undervalued at work, and maybe you are. What you need to do is you have something to say, and we would have to figure out what it is that you have to say. But it would be some variant of, I'm bringing more value to the table than I'm being compensated for, and that's demoralizing me. And it's also not good for you being my boss, because if I'm actually more valuable than is being recognized, then the fact that you're not valuing me properly means that I will become demoralized, I won't work properly, and you won't get the best out of me. So it's bad for both of us. And if your boss is in principle not amenable to such a discussion, then what you should seriously consider doing is finding another job. Okay, so let's say we're going to set you up for this. Okay, this isn't like next week's enterprise, man. This is your life. Let's assume that scales as you take on heavier and heavier loads. That more and more of you get more and more informed because you're doing more and more difficult things, but more and more of you gets unlocked. And so then what that would imply is that if you got to the point where you could look at the darkest things, so that would be the abyss, right? That would be the deepest abyss. If you could look at the harshest things, like the most brutal parts of the suffering of the world and the malevolence of people and society, if you could look at that straight and directly, that would turn you on maximally. And so that's the idea of rescuing your father, because imagine that you're like the potential composite of all the ancestral wisdom that's locked inside of you biologically. But that's not going to come out at all unless you stress yourself, unless you challenge yourself. And the bigger the challenge you take on, the more that's going to turn on.
Practice sharing your point of view if you have a slight difference in opinion with anyone. It could be something as simple as arguing for the best flavor of ice cream. Reflect on your relationships and think about where there's an imbalance. Does one of your friends make you feel angry when they ask you for outlandish favors all the time? Do you still say yes? Once you start figuring out where you put others' needs in front of your own, you'll know where to stand up for yourself. If you find this content interesting, then give this video a big thumbs up and make sure to hit that subscribe button below. See you in the next video.